In this tutorial, I'm going to look at using Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop together to take a pen or marker line drawing and convert that to a vector. We'll use the image trace and live paint tools to do this. Hope to give you a couple more things you can work with. I'm going to move across to Photoshop first of all and take a look at some of the designs that went into this work. I want to start by pointing out that a design like this, trying to do it straight off the bat works some of the time, but a lot of the time it needs a bit of careful development and editing. And even the version you're seeing here on the right hand side isn't the one I settled on. I end up needing to redraw it to separate some of the elements to allow the digital processes to work. However, what I've got at this stage is this photograph of my final drawing. This has been made with Copic markers, and I chose them for a couple of reasons. Copic markers gave me a nice solid, opaque kind of line that doesn't vary too much. There's not a lot of shading or gradient work, and this process works best with illustrations where we can see clean, solid areas of colour. It's still got some slight kind of bleeds and wobbles in the line, and that's what we want to kind of preserve at this stage. If we come back across to Illustrator, the whole point of having a design that feels like this is it looks clean and digital, but it still has a kind of hand-drawn element and style to it that would be difficult to recreate if we were just going to create it as a vector from scratch. And therefore image tracing from our own work allows us to kind of retain and preserve some of that appearance. So let's come across to Photoshop. I need this drawing to be ready to work with, and to allow the Adobe Illustrator kind of process that we're going to look at to work, this needs to be a drawing that is as close to monotone as possible and as crisp and as clear as possible. At the moment there are a couple of problems. We've got a gradient with darker area across the bottom and light towards the top. The black marker pen has become a bit washed out in the photograph, so we're just going to adjust a couple of things. I'm going to start by cropping the piece. I'm going to bring up the bottom here. I'm going to crop in quite tightly to the artwork itself, and I'm going to rotate it ever so slightly as well to adjust for problems when photographing it until I've got the framing I want, and then click the tick to agree to that change. And at this point I'm going to start looking at editing the levels. I can go to Image, Adjustments and Levels, or use the shortcut Control or Command L. And that brings up the Levels window. And in this case, I'm going to use these preset little color pickers on the right hand side to get my color balance correct. I'm going to start by setting the black level. To do this, I'm going to select the darkest of those three little pen tools. And I'm going to look for a dark shade, one of these things in the lettering somewhere, that actually is the lightest version of those colors. And I think here in the middle of the M or on the E is where those colors feel the lightest. And what this is going to do is tell Photoshop that anything that's darker than that tone or shade, I want to be represented actually as pure black. I'm going to do the same with the white and find the darkest area of the light section, do the opposite, and set everything that degree or lighter is to be white. And then I can just use the central slider to kind of move things around, check my balance is correct there until I'm happy. And at that stage, I am pretty happy with that. There's a little bit of kind of gradation creeping in from the bottom right hand corner, but as this is in the background and not in the content I'm actually recording, that's actually going to work out okay for me. So I'm going to click OK at this point. Then I go to Select All or Command or Control A, and I'm going to copy it, so Command or Control C, and move across to Adobe Illustrator, where I've got a new document set up ready to go, and I'm going to paste this in, reducing the size slightly, just so I can see what's going on the screen nice and clearly. Okay, so I now have my black and white kind of pixel-based image correct. I'm actually going to move it over to the grey space here, the scratch area, and you'll see why in a few minutes' time. And I'm ready to start converting this to a vector. Now this is a really straightforward process that Illustrator has set up. We would avoid doing this with other people's imagery and photography, but if you're working for your own design, the tool we're going to use is very useful, and that is image trace. If you've got the right settings in your workspace, and you can change your workspace up here on this button by choosing Essentials Classic ideally, then you'll have an image trace button here. And with that, a drop-down menu where we can choose different types of image trace. For this monotone image, I'm actually going to choose a 3-color image trace. There is a black and white logo version, but that often takes liberties with edges and simplifies things a little too much for my liking. So I'm going to go to the 3-color one and let Illustrator do its work. It's going to go through some processes, and in this case has quite quickly converted the vector. And if you were watching keenly there, what we're seeing is that this has been converted to a slightly flatter, slightly cleaner image. A lot of the pixelation we saw from the Photoshop version has been cleaned up and smoothed out, and there are only now 3 actual values in play. We've got black, white, and this kind of off-white creeping in from the corner. So that's ready to work with. At this stage, I've converted to a vector successfully, but I now want to be able to recolor it as well. And the first thing I need to do is expand it. What expanding does is it takes what is one complex vector image, in this case created by the image trace, but if I hit expand, it will convert that to all the individual paths, and we see all of these outlined in blue, ready to separate. At the moment they're all grouped, so if I click on any part of the image, all of them are selected, so I will need to ungroup them, and there will be groups within groups. So all I'm going to do is hold Command and Shift on the keyboard and tap G several times. So that's Command Shift G to ungroup items, and I should find now that if I select any one item, it should only select that one, and that is what I'm after. Because what I want to do essentially is get rid of all this negative space, and that's pretty easy to do. I'm going to select one area, and I do want all of these little white spaces. Finding and selecting them all would be time consuming, but now I know there's very few colors in this document, I can again use tools, and I can go to select, same, fill color, and it will select all of the areas that are color, and I'm just going to go ahead and use the keyboard to delete those areas. We can see now there's these other slightly darker white tones, so if I select one of those and go to select, same, fill color, and again delete, it should get rid of the rest of them, leaving me with just my black outlines. So I'm going to grab these now, and I can see that they're completely transparent, there's plenty of negative space between them, and place them back on my page to begin adding some color work. I do want this against a solid background, so I am going to place at this point a rectangle, a solid color that I'm going to place behind my work in a minute. I am going to recolor that to a nice duck egg blue that I've chosen to complement the design. And I'm going to reshuffle the layers and kind of move things around. So I'm going to rearrange this. I'm going to use Command Shift and open square bracket on the keyboard to just nudge that arrangement of layers so that that background is behind the rest of my design work. So at this stage I am ready to proceed to recoloring things using Light Paint.